a summer Saturday, they stood in an unbroken chain of sadness from New York to Washington. Surrounded by the drama of his death, they had come to touch the event themselves. To see it, to believe it, to lock it in their personal recollection. In the life of this exciting man, there had been some splendid excitements, and now it would return only in the memory. Surrounded by the images and emotions of his last days, it was difficult to accept that he had held elected office less than 4 years and had campaigned for himself only twice in his lifetime. Always before, it had been for someone else. In 1960, John Kennedy was in Los Angeles. Robert Kennedy was with him, as he had been each time before. All that day there was talk of defections. All that time, up until the first tally, John Kennedy checked with his brother every hour. He saw his brother in the center of the Wyoming delegation. And then the Wyoming delegation cast all 15 for the next President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. The President went to the convention hall, and Bob was there. And they walked over to the corner of the room, and then you could see what they meant to each other. Long ago, he had submerged his own ambitions and his own causes in those of his brother. In 1957, he began his first public service at his brother's side. The hand of history saw that it would not be his last. Beneath the awesome shadows of his responsibility, the President would need him nearby. But how do you appoint your brother Attorney General? I will, said the President. Come out of my house very early in the morning. I will look one way, and then the other. And then, if there is no one in sight, I will whisper, it's Bobby.
That we should secure the best talent we could get for every position, regardless of party, regardless of any other factor. And I think that in every position, this test has been applied, and it's been applied in this case. To my satisfaction, I hope the satisfaction of the Senate and the people of this country.
Satisfaction with his appointment was not unanimous. Many newspapers called it disappointing. But he set out to prove his critics wrong.
Okay. Oxford, when the troops came in, people started throwing things at them, even though they...
His staff, one writer observed, is a remarkable blend of energy, imagination, and informality. But behind the informality of his office lay hard decisions and large responsibilities. As a private citizen, he enjoyed the full blessings of this life. As Attorney General, he would not be spared the troubles and anguish of those in another part of America who had suffered too long. There are injustices, he said, and they are flagrant. I have the power to do something about them. I intend to do it. They staked their lives on his word and were not disappointed.
May I make another personal request on behalf of, I think, all of us, that we must be sure that we adhere absolutely to nonviolence.
Yeah. Hello? Oh, Nick? Now, did the governor say anything which would lead us not to issue this proclamation?
When a governor imagined he could defy the law of the land, the Attorney General sent the agents of justice to prove him wrong.
And I'm asking from you an unequivocal assurance that you will not bar entry to Vivian Malone and to James Hood, and that you will step aside peacefully and do your constitutional duty.
He meant what he said. The law would be respected. Justice would be served equally in every part of the land. The lesson was not lost on those of reason, and it left no bitterness in its wake.
I'm glad to come to University of Alabama. I'm delighted to see the inside of this. I didn't think it meant anything that they snuck me around the back way. They said somebody was waiting out in front there.
The nation was learning what the president already knew, that his brother was more than another cabinet member. He was a trusted advisor whose views were sought on every problem. Together, in the fall of 1962, they would face the country's greatest crisis. On October the 14th, 1962, aerial reconnaissance revealed the presence of Russian missiles in Cuba. It would confront the president with his most delicate decision. It was, he realized, the world's first nuclear crisis. But the precedent he set here must be the right one for history. A State Department advisor who was there at those fateful meetings said later, "Of all the president's advisors, Robert Kennedy brought more wisdom to that table than any other." There was disagreement. Robert Kennedy often stood alone, but his counsel finally prevailed. The missiles were removed. The world's first nuclear crisis was resolved. In 1962, the president sent him on a world tour. In Japan, he acknowledged their welcome with his own special notion of their native tongue.
I am not finished yet.
He told them the truth about America and confronted her critics head-on, wherever he found them.
What is it that we're doing in the United States? Can you tell me? I appreciate your frankness. And I think you would expect the same from me. And you're going to get it. You're talking about the United States 100 years ago. Now, this is not what Marx was talking about 100 years ago. I mean, that's just gone, that's past age. We're not run by Governor Rockefeller.
He was asked once what was the most important decision of his life. His answer, marrying Ethel.
Nina, son.
She was his secret weapon, and as game as he was in any situation.
Nina, son, Omeni,
A special flair and charm disarmed the critics and won friends wherever they went. Her way with children was a natural gift and recognized no barriers of language or place. She shared fully in all he did, in the joys, the dreams, and the hazards of his life. She was at his side in South Africa. And in that divided land, at the university, he shared his view of the promise and dangers of our time.
First is the danger of futility. The belief there is nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world build, against misery, against ignorance, or injustice and violence. Few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. So we part, I to my country, and you to remain. We are, as a man of 40 can claim the privilege, fellow members of the world's largest younger generation. I believe that in this generation, those with the courage to enter the conflict will find themselves with companions in every corner of the world. There is a Chinese curse which says, "May he live in interesting times." Like it or not, we live in interesting times.
In West Berlin, they would visit the wall, which he described as that great snake lying across the heart of a city, a disgrace to human dignity. He saw in these people, too, a commitment to principles stronger than their fear of death. It was the beginning of a long journey through the regions of doubt and despair. The bullet had touched him as surely as it had touched his brother. It was a nearly complete withdrawal from life. He had always said little. He now said less.
I realize that as an individual, that we can't just look back, that we must look forward. When I think of President Kennedy, I think of what Shakespeare said in Romeo and Juliet, when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he shall make the face of heaven so fine, that all the world will be in love with night, and pay no worship to the garish sun. If we dedicate ourselves, as he frequently did, to all of you when they quoted from Robert Frost, that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
For reasons that were both personal and compelling, on March the 23rd, he challenged Mount Kennedy, then the highest unclimbed peak in North America. At 1:10 on the second day, he reached the summit. And he would remember Aeschylus. When the height is won, then there is ease. He entered the Senate in characteristic style. leaning forward, since everything to him lay ahead. Although only 1 in 100 in this high place, he found satisfaction. He had written about and been at the center of much of the history of his day, but he felt there was so much more to be done.
The money must come from federal revenues. Without very large amounts of
money, it was a time to listen, to ponder a new commitment.
Of our cities will continue and worse.
What do you anticipate are your needs?
We figure that over and above...
His duty in the Senate chamber led him to listen and to speak to the problems of our time. But his conscience called him to action, to reach beyond the committees and the statistics to the people themselves.
Mike, do you agree with me that we could be doing much more amongst that group than we are at the present time?
Towards the dispossessed and the powerless, he felt a special concern. And he brought to them a touch of hope and the feeling that someone truly cared about the direction of their lives. The more he saw of this America which had been left behind, the more he would ask, what of their future? Starved in mind and body, crippled in spirit, they have been damaged beyond repair. He saw in America an island of poverty in a sea of affluence. They heard him and they believed him. He had a way of reaching across the old lines, of opening up and releasing their spirit. In the barriadas and favelas of South America, he evoked the same response as in the slums of his own country. In a continent where most would die before the age of 4, where children without schools are doomed to a life of uselessness and poverty, he had to find out why.
Nations like men often march to the beat of different drummers. Still, the lesson of our time is that all must march toward increasing freedom, toward justice for all, toward a society strong and flexible enough to meet the demands of the future. Let us then give our strength and our sweat, our lives and our labor, and together we will make a hemisphere full of such freedom sons as will make the earth to sing and tremble in their passing.
When Freedom's sons were on the march in California, it was his march. To the followers of Cesar Chavez, protesting the suffering of migrant workers, he said, "When your children and grandchildren take their place in America, though you may be old and bent from many years of labor, no man will stand taller than when you say, 'I was there. I marched with Caesar.'" And he was there to share with Caesar the triumph of the march, the breaking of his fast, and the benediction of a cause that couldn't wait.
I think you have one time around, and I don't know what's going to be in existence in 6 months or a year and a half or 2 years. Or so I think that you have to feel that that there are all of these problems in which you are here on Earth to make some kind of contribution of some kind. So I think that I'm impatient, and I suppose I would hope everybody be impatient. And there was somebody wrote on the pyramids, time they were being constructed, the words, and no one was angry enough to speak out. I think people should be angry enough to speak out. I think there are injustices, and I think there are unfairnesses in my own country and around the world, and I think that if one feels it involved in it, that one should try to do something about
it. For this war, he shared the responsibility, but now he spoke out against it, not in anger, but in deepening sorrow. Why, he asked, should the black and the poor bear an unequal burden of the sacrifice there? Can we ordain to ourselves the awful majesty of God to decide what villages are to be destroyed, who is to live, and who is to die? Concerned that the hopes of a whole generation might be buried out here, he called, as he had before, for a re-evaluation of principles.
We have the capacity to make this the best generation in the history of mankind, or make it the last. And I don't think that we can just afford to stand still or sit. I think that we have to give some direction. President Kennedy's favorite quote was really from Dante, that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of moral crisis preserve their neutrality. So if all of us, whether it's in the field of civil rights or housing, or whether it's in Vietnam or whatever it is, just hang back and say this is a problem of somebody else, then we're going to be in difficulty. Even if we look at this selfishly, we're going to be in difficulty. The whole system's going to be in difficulty. I think that for all of us, that we have an obligation. We have a responsibility. If we don't do it, then nobody's going to do it. Well, we have a special, not only responsibility, but a special opportunity to make a difference in the world and make a difference for this country.
In the spring of 1968, he made the most important political decision of his life: to run for the presidency of the United States. Not merely to oppose any man, but to seek new policies to close the gaps.
I don't think it's tolerable that young men and young women growing up in our great cities are not able to find jobs. I don't think it's tolerable here in this country that a young boy or a young girl, even when they finish school, are illiterate and uneducated, and therefore can't go on to either a college or university or on to an employment. And I think whites and blacks, poor and rich together, that we can work together. Jefferson once said about the United States that we were the last best hope of mankind. That's what I want the United States to be. This is a generous and compassionate country. That's what I want this country to stand for. Not violence, not lawlessness, not disorder, but compassion and love and peace. That's what this country should stand for, and that's what I intend to do if I'm elected president.
If I had a hammer, I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd a hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd a hammer out danger, I'd a hammer out warning, I'd a hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Oh, if I had a song, I'd
On the evening of April the 4th, somewhere over Indiana, Robert Kennedy was informed that Martin Luther King had been shot. Again the bullet, again the agony.
Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. And dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people.
The prayer he asked for America would not be answered in his lifetime. Perhaps for his children, not for him.
My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. To be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. Those of us who loved him pray that what he was to us, what he wished for others, will someday come to pass for all the world. As he said many times in many parts of this nation, to those he touched and who sought to touch him, some men see things as they are and say why. I dream things that never were and say why not.